All right, thanks everybody for being here. And I'll just keep an eye on the waiting room, but we'll go ahead and start. So welcome to the third presentation in Steep Rock Association's Winter Speaker Series. So tonight's talk is on bountiful backyard harvests, mastering sustainable and organic vegetable gardening. And my name is Denise Arturi, and I am the manager and head gardener for Judea Garden here at Steep Rock, and also Steep Rock's volunteer coordinator. So just a few housekeeping notes. So we'd appreciate if you could please make sure your Zoom is on mute so that we can reduce any background noise. We will answer questions at the end of the presentation. So we would advise you to use the chat box. So as questions come up, and then I will moderate those for the speaker at the end. We are recording this event. So if you're interested in listening to it again, let us know. Tomorrow, we will be sending out a short questionnaire asking for feedback on this presentation. And we definitely appreciate your input as that helps us plan for future events. We have one more remaining talk in this year's series, and that will be on April 18th. And John Markelin, who is president of the Litchfield Land Trust, will be presenting establishing pollinator pathways in your backyard. So it'll be just in time to get those things started this spring. And then finally, I want to recognize and thank National Iron Bank for their sponsorship of Steep Rock's conservation education programs, as well as our supporters and donors who enable us to provide these programs to you at no cost to you. So now let me introduce our speaker. Patrick Horan has over 30 years of experience in practicing and promoting sustainable agriculture. Along with his brother Quincy, he owns and manages Waldingfield Farm, which is a certified organic vegetable operation here in Washington. They specialize in heirloom varieties, and they cultivate between 25 and 30 acres of land each year. And they're now entering their 35th season, I believe. Waldingfield Farm has participates in farmers markets in the area, and they also have a CSA model. I'm going to pop their web address in the chat box, so I would say check it out because they have delicious vegetables. Patrick and Quincy have been great supporters of Judea Garden, and they have answered many of my gardening questions. I know you will learn a lot tonight. So Patrick, thank you so much for being here tonight, helping us out, and let's learn how to garden.
Thank you very much, Denise, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening on a cold March evening. Doesn't feel that spring has sprung, but she has, and I promise you we can all start getting our hands dirty in the soil soon enough. As Denise mentioned, we have a long history with Steep Rock, my family, and Denise and I first connected way back at the beginning of Judea Garden's inception, and I'm thrilled to see how that has grown, and also to see how Steep Rock has begun to bring in sustainability on the agricultural side into their overall model. And that's really wonderful to be a part of it. So without further ado, tonight's talk I'm calling Creating a Sustainable Organic Garden, Lessons and Tips to Create the Most Ecologically Sound Backyard Possible. Here we go. So by way of a little background, Waldingfield was the business that Quincy, my twin brother, and my brother Daniel and I started in 1990. It's something which came to us from being introduced to gardening by a friend in Cornwall, Connecticut. We spent our summers as kids. A fellow named Gordon Ridgway, who's the first selectman, and one of the oldest organic farms in the state, was really the reason we got interested in gardening, which then became a full-fledged farm. And we grew up in New York City, but we would come to our grandparents' what was then a country house, and marvel at all the agricultural fields we had and neighboring farms. Davies Hollow, which was run by the Bronson family and then the Nye family for years. They farmed about 60 acres of our fields. And then in 1990, my brothers and I decided, well, we were going to start to take back some of it. And lo and behold, we are growing somewhere between 25 and 30 acres a year, as Denise alluded to. But we started on a far more humble scale. We started on just over a quarter acre behind the old barn, and it felt as if we were farming 25 acres. So the purpose of this talk is to emphasize the fact that a small garden can still be a lot of work and a lot of pleasure. So it's today we run a CSA model farm and a market farm and participate in quite a few farmers markets from Brooklyn to New Haven to our very own here in Washington Depot. And it was all born out of a little idea 35 years ago in a small plot, which we didn't envision, couldn't possibly have envisioned it going to where it has gone today. So you want to grow something, but you're unsure where to start. I've wrestled with this as a starting point because growing things is part of our nature as human beings. To nurture and then cultivate is something which, as soon as man and women figured it out, it was something we instinctively went towards to manipulate nature and create our food source. And the separation from soil really has come along in our culture only in the last 125 years. Up until the beginning of the 20th century, the majority of Americans still had some physical connection to growing food. And I think that you can become a master grower on a rooftop, on a deck, in a small yard, with the emphasis being on the satisfaction that comes from producing food or growing flowers for pollinators, etc. It's immensely satisfying. So you think about, well, why do I want to do this? Because there are a lot of benefits to growing your own food. And, I think of it as the physical and the spiritual. It breaks down to you're creating something healthy and delicious. It's a tremendously inexpensive form of recreation just to be outside. And it's really good for your mental health to be one with nature. And it's something you can do with your family or on your own. And you can become more connected. And I don't mean that in a new agey way. I mean that, you can quite literally become more connected to your environment. And something as simple as starting a vegetable garden, though it may seem daunting at first, I say wait until you pick your first tomato. And then it'll take off from there. It really will. And so when you're approaching starting, if you've never done it before, you have to figure out, well, where are you going to put this garden? Obviously, you want to go towards the place with the most sun, right? Sun is key. You're looking for at least 6 hours a day of direct sunlight. That's the very best. But that doesn't mean that you can't grow things in very shady areas. It just limits what you can grow. And then you also need to go and figure out how well your soil drains. If there are no puddles after a big storm like the one we just had on last Saturday, where we had 3.5 or almost 4 inches of rain, you have to figure out that's good. If it's gone, if there's no puddle, it means that your site drains well, and vice versa. You have to, if it doesn't drain well, you might think about, but that's the only place that you have, in your plot. Then there are ways to remedy that. And you should set yourself, goals when you're starting out, which are attainable, 4 tomato plants and maybe a couple of a squash plants, something which is within your bandwidth, so to speak. And when you have a finite amount of space, it often means that maybe you're taking away lawn, which some people really covet. But, the aesthetic pleasures that come from being amongst a well-organized and well-planned garden is really, well, it's for me. I guess I'm biased, but I find it great joy in looking at a well-designed garden, far more joy than looking at a lawn. Now, I know historically there are, unfortunately, there are homeowner associations throughout the United States which don't allow you to plant a garden, which I don't understand it, but hopefully they'll see the light going forward. Now, if you have to make that choice of taking away garden, you've got to figure out where you're going to plant, and you have to plan out a garden just like you would plan out a house or a park, right? It can be a wonderfully creative opportunity for one to flex out their design skills. There are a couple of places which there's some links here, which I find that, Connecticut NOFA, of which I'm a part of, they have a whole section which can help you with garden design and landscape design to do it organically without the use of synthetic chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, etc. But when it comes down to it, you want to get familiar with the space. And if planting in the garden, you also have to think about, what edible crops, what kind of size, how big are they going to get? Do you want to put in a fruit tree? Do you want to, what type of soil do they need? I would also recommend highly getting your soil tested just to make sure, that something which UConn, the agricultural extension, can do for you inexpensively. It's something like $7 for the sample. They'll tell you if you need to add nutrients to your soil or what your pH is, etc. All things which help whatever you eventually plan to plant grow better. There is Elliot Coleman, who's a kind of a godfather of organic farming here in the U.S. He has the Organic Farm Handbook, which I think is in its 4th or 5th editions at this point. It came out in 1989, the year we started, and has been a well-thumbed through addition to our library. But you can also use the agricultural extensions at UConn or UMass or Cornell, who take questions from everyone on any subject. Now, when you're preparing your garden site, whether it's if your kitchen garden is, for lack of a better word, is outside and it's on a lawn and you don't want to dig it up, you can do raised beds. And raised beds are, can sometimes cost because of the material, but if you use untreated wood, the beds will the frames will probably have to be replaced every 5 to 10 years. And if you use treated wood, you can have those beds forever, or you can use metal. But it's a nice way of designing in a finite spaced yard, an area in which you grow, and you can build soil in. You can either buy soil bags, or you can ask a local farmer if he's got some topsoil. We use for local resources, Waldingfield uses McEnroe Organic Farm over in Amenia, New York, for potting soils, for soil top cover when we need it for our high tunnels. But for a small raised bed garden, you should be able to use the soil that's in your backyard. You may have to hire somebody to come in and help you if you decide to till the sod, and till the ground if you don't have a tiller. But usually there are people here in Washington, for sure, there are people who can do that. Now, if you have poor soil, raised beds really are a great way to do it, because your plants will grow better than they would if they were going into what you would call weak soil. Now, we all have a list of things we love to eat. The funny thing is Americans eat only between 8 to 10 different vegetables on average a year. And at our farm, we plant over 80 varieties or different vegetables. And within that varieties, we grow about 50 different types of tomatoes. We grow about 10 different types of eggplant and peppers. So pretty soon you can spend all day just figuring out what crops to grow. But I always say, start small and start with what you like to eat. Now, not everybody is a nightshade person, but tomatoes I find to be an immensely satisfying plant to grow for the home gardener and the urban gardener alike. They can grow in contained spaces. They grow up, and they don't take up a lot of space. And the satisfaction of eating a sun-ripened tomato is really, really, well, second to none. But I also think that you should experiment when you are choosing your crops for your new garden. Put in one or two things that you've always wanted to grow. Or I hear that this is a good thing to have in your garden because it brings beneficial insects, or deer don't like the taste of it. So when I tell people who ask about, what should I grow, I always say, well, look, lettuce is good too. Start with salad greens, something which are relatively easy to grow. They don't require a lot of space, and you can get multiple cuts and harvests. Particularly if you grow a direct seed mix, you can cut 2 to 4 times. You can get mixes out of it. And then lastly, particularly if you're just kind of starting out, don't forget that herbs are also crops. Herbs are something which I think that even the least green-thumbed person can grow successfully in small amounts. Things like parsley, chives, and sage, and basil, and tarragon, etc. So, again, start small. Start with what you like. And if you're like me, I would start with a tomato. Now, when you're planning your garden, you have to also think about what things grow best next to each other, right? This is called companion planting. Now, throughout time, man and women historically understood that to only plant one thing in the same place year after year would have a negative effect on that plant's ability to successfully produce every year, right? So early on, man adapted what's called companion planting. Now, the most amazing thing about this is that cultures in diverse continents who had never connected with each other practice a very similar form of companion planting. But I'll use the most famous one as an example. Indigenous Americans used what we call the Holy Trinity of planting, in which they have maize, a pole bean, in this case, a legume, and a squash. 3 plants, 3 different companions, all growing next to each other and all serving the purpose of aiding them to each grow to their best abilities. Now, for example, maize. Maize is planted first, so your corn stalk grows. That corn, which historically they would have used to grind and make the breads and other types of flatbreads and a meal, the plant itself actually takes a lot out of the soil. So in order to replenish the soil, the Native Americans figured out, well, if we grow a pole bean, which would have a built-in trellis, it would then have a nitrogen deposit at the end of it, because legumes, for those of us who know and those who don't know, legumes are nitrogen depositors. The most important single element required for growing food is nitrogen. And then the third part is the squash plant. So this big, broad-leafed plant, which gives you a beautiful, wonderful gourd at the end of it. Well, they have the ability to shade out the weeds and other opportunistic organisms from growing. So 3 crops, 3 different harvests, all with a different purpose. And that is the basic element of companion planting. Now, in your garden, if you decide to have 3 things to start, I would highly advise you find the principal thing you really want to grow, and then find out 2 or 3 different things which are companions. So here on this guide here, you'll see the 3 sisters. That's what I just spoke about. I call it the Trinity. Then you have tomatoes and cucumbers and brassicas, which are the broccolis and kales, etc. If you go to the Farmer's Almanac, the companion planting guide, the link is here. Terrific use, and highly recommend. Now, when you're starting, you've got your garden planned, you got your site, you've either created your beds, either raised beds or directly into the ground. What are you going to do? Are you going to start them from seed at home and incubate and propagate from home under grow lights? Or are you going to go to a nursery or a local farm and purchase transplants? Well, if you're doing it from seed, that's great. It lowers your costs, and you could potentially have a greater selection because you'd be able to purchase the seed and then grow what you want. But I think that there's no shame in buying seedlings, and it's there are a lot of local places from White Flower Farm that have both both vegetable and decorative flowers to purchase. Small local farms like Hungry Reaper Farm in Morris have a plant sale every spring, or same with Fort Hill Farm in New Milford. So all of these are, I think there's nothing wrong with going and supporting that business or those businesses and creating your garden from that. Again, no shame in buying good starts. Half the kind of the hardest part has been done for you, and then it may instigate you later on to do that. So, and when you go to a nursery, if you're going to go to a larger nursery, you have to do. Oh, I've got some dogs barking. Apologies. One of the things that you want to when you choose going to a nursery, really ask questions of the producer. Find out, did they buy the seeds themselves, or did they buy these transplants from another place? And I say this because the big box retailers of the world, the Home Depots, the Lowe's, who every spring you'll see just huge amounts of transplants available. Well, that's fine because they can do it relatively inexpensively, but there's a little story to tell about traceability when it comes to purchasing from the big nurseries, or what I call the big six box stores. Back in 2009, some of you may recall, the whole eastern seaboard experienced what can be called a complete and utter disaster in the tomato world, because we had late blight. And it turned out that the late blight came from a big store, Home Depot nursery in Alabama, which shipped thousands upon thousands of plants, transplants, seedlings up north, which were infected with late blight. Late blight is the same pathogen which the Irish potato famine, you guys will all recall what that is. So anyway, the home gardener purchases these tomato plants, puts them in their backyard, and the next thing you know, unbeknownst to them, this pathogen was thriving and being spread, because it's airborne, all throughout the Northeast. And Waldingfield, by example, we lost, I guess it was about 35,000 plants in under a week in July of 2009. So anyway, if you choose to purchase your seedlings, get them from a local farm, get them from a nursery who you think you may know, and ask questions about where these came from. And I would also say focus on organic seed stock and heirloom varietals. They're infinitely more interesting than the things which you may see at your local salad bar. And then, if possible, if the plant looks tired or beaten up, most plants are pretty hardy. You can bring them back. You can nurture them back to health. But, take your time to look for healthy plants. If you don't know what a healthy plant looks like, certainly ask anybody at the nursery to help you out. Now, you've got your plot, you got your seedlings and your seed chosen, and you're making your garden. Now you need to have some sort of composting system, both for when you start to harvest, but also to use as top dressing, as we call, to help aid your soil. Now, the compost is pretty easy to make. It doesn't take much space. You need 3 square feet. And I think that even the smallest backyards can figure out how to do that. A lot of them now you can get, which are standing and rotate, they turn. And it's something where if you create good organic matter, and you create a system where your carbon materials, your leaves, your ground trimmings, and then your nitrogen comes from the green materials, all your kitchen scraps, you will create quite literally a living system. And Therefore, you'll be able to maintain and feed your own garden with something which you are also creating with your own waste. You also limit the amount you take to the dump, which is great. Composting is something which also is the idea is like, oh, it's going to smell. A well-run compost system does not smell at all. And I want to dispel that myth before anybody, barks an alarm. I know some people, it's not like having a manure pile next door to your house. It's composting shouldn't smell at all, and if it does, you just turn it more frequently so it cooks. Now, I've included here an old picture that I found online of an early irrigation system because fruits and vegetables are made primarily of water. And so you're going to have to make sure that your garden has access to water. And, historically, Mother Nature has been able to provide enough for the home garden. But, today with time release water systems you can get at your local hardware store or nursery. You should be able to figure out, you can have a time release, which is really nice if you're going to be away, turns on every day at 6, turns off at 6:30, etc. Now, unlike last summer, where we had historic amounts of rain and growing was a challenge, and our farm didn't turn on the irrigation system once after June 15 or so, you will find that a half an hour a week of direct on the plant watering is enough for just about everything, minus some delicate salad greens. Now, obviously, if we have unusually warm temperatures, you have to adjust. But on the whole, most plants don't need as much water as you would think. If you are growing primarily in what you call loamy, sandy soils or very hot regions, yeah, you're going to need to water more. Or if your soil, in the loamy side, the sandy side, that means it just drains right out. So you might have to add some more. But Mother Nature, I always say she's a mercurial dance partner. And you just have to if she's doing a rumba, you're not doing a cha-cha. You got to make sure that you understand what the rumba is. And water system, like, pay attention to the weather. Pay attention to, have a weather app. Find out what it's going to be like 5-6 days out. Those will really help you plant your garden and nurture it. And as I say, there's something to be said for just knowing what the environment, how wet it is. I mean, we're in the Northeast, it's incredibly humid. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to rain all the time. So anyway, that's something to think about. Down in the Washington Supply and other places like Home Depot, you can get all your drip irrigation that you'd need, any of the timing mechanisms you need for your garden hoses, etc. And because we live in the Northeast and you've decided to become a home garden expert, you're going to spend a lot of time doing maintenance. And that usually correlates to what we call weeding. And there are, the maintenance side, you've got your these protective barriers you may have. We live in deer country, we live in bear country, we live in rabbits, etc. All these wonderful cohabitants of our ecosystem. They all want to eat too. They're looking for a salad bar, but it can be a little annoying to nurture something and to have, you're going out to cut your first head of red bib lettuce and you find the entire thing has been taken out by an opportunistic woodchuck or rabbit. So fencing is something you should think about when you're planning your garden, right? But then more importantly, when you're talking about the pests, which can be a real difficulty, things like flea beetles and aphids. Well, we use and highly recommend something called Rime, which is a synthetic fiber cover, which is thin enough to allow rainwater in and thick enough to keep frost off. It also works as a bit of an insulator, so it's a heat containing barrier, and it it's not aesthetically to everybody's liking. It looks like a white towel out in the field, but it works. And then the one thing it doesn't do is it doesn't help with the actual weeding. So getting down in the ground, getting dirty, well, that's kind of it. That's what it's all about anyway for us who do it for a living. It's great exercise. We call it being in farm shape. The kids who come and work each summer for their summer job, their first couple of weeks, they're either planting or weeding. And the weeding they really kvetch about, but it's extremely satisfying to start and then finish a long row of something that was a sea of weeds, and then it's not. And then you just, you harvest them, you shake it out, so you leave the soil there, and then you just lay them right there, because that becomes your mulch, the basis of your mulching system, which we talk about here, which is we call much ado about mulch. Now, if I say your garden will only require about 1 hour a week of weeding and about half an hour to an hour a week of watering, a lot of it has to do with mulch. Now, mulching is, well, as I have it put here, it's the gardener's best friend. Now, mulch can be almost any organic matter. Your lawn crew comes and mows your lawn. Have them leave the grass clippings. What you don't use in your garden, you can put into your compost pile. Your leaves, when you are, doing your spring cleanup, put some of those leaves aside. All the dead weeds you're weeding when you're doing your weeding in your garden, there. Use those as mulch. You lay them right down. You wrap them around the plants. Put them in your aisles. These are huge. And one of the things that they do is they keep sunlight away from the soil so the weeds that are underneath in the soil don't grow. They retain moisture, which is one of the reasons why if you only water between a half hour to an hour a week, the other moisture is coming from your mulch. And then it adds more organic matter. So it's feeding the living ecosystem within your ground. And the more you feed it, the better it is. And I think that mulching is actually one of, if not the most important aspect of a garden, other than choosing the right crops to grow. But mulching is pretty important. And when you're doing it on a small scale, you don't have to use plastic mulch the way, if we're putting in our tomatoes at the farm, back in the day, my brother Quincy hay mulched 40,000 tomato plants. That's a lot of hay. That took a lot of time, and it was a very expensive lesson, but we learned it, right? And it worked. But on a small scale, definitely use everything around you. Your yard can probably provide you with all the mulch you'll need. If not, a local farmer will have a bale or two of hay, etc. So now you got your garden planted, you got mulch, you got your water layout, but now you're thinking about, okay, I planted everything and it all came at the same time. Well, it's not going to happen because you're going to do what we call succession planting. You're going to plan a garden to harvest and bring you something every month from June, July, October, September, September, October, November, right? August, the whole summer and into the fall, because you will find a way to, every time you've got something that you're pulling out, you've got a transplant to put back in, right? It takes a little bit of planning, for sure. But what it allows you to do, it allows even the most inexperienced home gardener to produce food for about 4 to 6 months of the year, which is a pretty good. And you do that through succession planting. If you planted everything at the same time in May, it's all going to come in the middle of July or early August, and it's all done by September. Succession planting done correctly will help alleviate that issue. And now one of the things it also does is if you've grown something in one spot in the spring, say a sugar snap pea, you're going to find something when the sugar snap peas are done, you're going to find a plant which, hey, what needs a lot of nitrogen? Because remember, legumes are big nitrogen depositors. So then you're going to plant something there which would need a more amount of non-synthetic nitrogen coming from the soil. So winter squash plants are often really good things which follow, because one is done by the end of June, early July, and then you put in a winter squash mid-June to the beginning of July, and then you would have a pumpkin or a butternut squash by the middle of October. Again, your succession planting, you're getting multiple harvests, you're maximizing your space. So you've got this home garden and you've created some food. You've been outside a couple more hours a week than you had maybe previously done. What does it mean? What does it mean for your environment and for you? I think that it's easy in today's day and age to forget about what your ecosystem, your local ecosystem, does. And, for every garden that started, you are allowing the local ecosystem to piggyback and grow and get bigger and restore itself. I know the next talk is on the pollinators. We have a thing at the farm. We're part of the pollinator pathway program in a group called Eco 59, where you plant indigenous plants to reintroduce older bee varietals, older pollinator varietals who've disappeared because so few things were being grown, right? So you're participating in the restoration of your local ecosystem. You also become less reliant upon food from elsewhere. Now, yeah, granted, it's in a small way, but 5% difference is huge. You don't have to do it 100%. Nobody's asking you to eat everything from your own backyard. Now, that's pretty awesome if you can do that. That's hardcore. But any opportunity to be less reliant on a food source from elsewhere reduces the carbon footprint, trucking and planes, et cetera, but also it connects you. It reconnects you with nature. And, you're practicing things like water conservation, you're practicing your own well-being, you're enhancing your own well-being, both your mental and your physical. And, I understand that this is a fairly, it's an oversight type talk, but you got to start somewhere, and starting small, starting with what you like, doing something, creating a goal for yourself, which is attainable as a gardener, finding a reliable source for seedlings if you need them, or a farmer who you like, asking them questions. The internet is filled with information. Your library, Gun Memorial Library, has tons of books on growing. But more importantly, after a couple of seasons, you'll start to believe that, oh, you know what? I can do this, and I can create something really marvelous. And, my brothers and I are actually examples of people who didn't come from growing, had never grown a garden in our life, started very small. And who knows, maybe, somebody here becomes a farmer out of it, or even just a very enthusiastic home producer. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to the talk. I hope that they do these in person in the future. Far more fun to get in front of people. but I know Denise had said that if people had questions, we were happy to answer them at the end. So I'm going to kick it back to Denise and then hopefully answer some questions you may have. Thanks very
Thank
much.
you so much, Patrick. That was really awesome. One of the questions on one of your slides was planting a garden, when and how.
Mhm.
You had the NOFA address, and then
Oh
there
yeah,
was another one. It was hard to read.
sorry. Yep. Hold on. I have that. I realized that. So that is the so it's right in front of my nose when I don't have it here. Hold on, hold on. Of course, as I was throwing my talk across, hold on. It was on the planting the garden page.
Yes, where, when, and how,
Oh, yeah, hold on.
that slide.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I just need to go back. Hold on. How do I do this? Pardon me. I've got to figure out how to go back into this. We'll come back to that. I've got to find that. I don't know how to go back on
Okay,
this damn thing.
we'll
Gosh.
figure it out. You
Okay.
can find
All right.
it.
Sorry.
Um, so one other question. Oh, you got it?
No, not yet. I'm gonna find it.
Okay. Um, there was one question about if you're composting through the winter, are
Yeah.
there any special considerations to do that?
Yes, absolutely. All right. So oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. Let me see here. Um, there are two things you can do. To All right, so yeah, this is the gardenista.com.
Ah, that was great. Somebody guessed it. That
Gardenista,
was Anthony.
yeah,
Anthony, you guessed that right.
gardenista.com. It's a great site. They're fun and they're kind of hip too. So
Cool.
winter composting. Two things. Composting soil is cooking in heating. The very definition, it's breaking down, so it's creating heat. I like for the home garden and for the home, I like to stand up turning ones. You rotate it once a day, and it's not going to freeze. Um, you create compost all year round. We eat every day, so if it's being turned regularly, you'll be able to keep it going. Now, say you're running out, you're creating more soil than you need. You can get some bags and you can put it in your basement and just use it in the spring, right? It's not going to go bad, or put it in your garage. Um, you can actually also add it to your garden in the winter time as top dressing, and then you can cover it with some mulch so it doesn't so the nutrients don't blow away. But definitely I like the standing ones for the if it I mean we haven't had much of a winter this year. Our compost pile was steaming all year. But even if it's in the ground, just turn it regularly.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody had a question about your CSAs
Okay.
and
So
where do you, how often, where's the locations, how can they sign up?
sure. So um, the community supported agriculture program, the concept, depending on who you ask, started either by European acolytes of Rudolf Steiner, or in Japan, um, by farmers whose land had been decimated by the war. Regardless, people started growing collectively for their communities while other people were doing other work. So while we don't have those issues to deal with in today's standard, the sense of joining a CSA, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture, it was the first thing our older brother Dan started when he started our farm. He got 8 friends and family to support him at the beginning of the farm before we had even produced any food. So Waldingfield has, if you go to our website, waldingfieldfarm.com, you'll see a tab to join our CSA. You can read all about it. And what we offer is 20 weeks or 10 weeks. Full shares are 20 weeks. Half shares are 10 weeks. They're bi-weekly pickups of seasonally produced organic food that we grow. And, I think that one of the reasons that CSAs became so successful in ours, we have 240 families, I guess, last year. We're probably around the same number this year. One of the reasons is because, I don't have the time to do my own garden, but I want to support my local farm, or I want to be connected to the land. But I would say that easily half of our share members have gardens of their own. Because people get great satisfaction out of actually going out and tending to something. It's nurturing. It's an innate thing for all human beings to want to nurture something. We are still, obviously, we love people joining our share, but we ask that people understand that it's a shared risk. I used that tomato blight example earlier in the talk. It was devastating to people that they had no tomatoes that year. It was devastating to us because we lost a lot of revenue. But CSAs really are about sharing the risk in what a farm produces, and understanding that ahead of time. Now, we're pretty good at it. We've done it for long enough. The slide which you're looking at right here, that's a sample. That's when people come to our barn, they pick up the share, etc. Waldingfieldfarm.com, CSA tab, and you can find all about it.
Great. That's good. Yeah. And it's a nice place to go, I will
Yeah,
say.
I think it is. I think it connects people.
So we have a question about somebody making a raised bed, and they want to know if there's concern about like contamination with the food, and I guess like treated wood
so
or
that's a really good
metal or.
That's a great question. So now, for example, so we're a certified organic farm. Our certifiers, who are the Bay State Organic certifiers from Massachusetts, and ergo the USDA, you can't use pressure treated wood on any greenhouse or anything, any raised beds that you want to have certified food growing out of, because the potential leaching of carcinogens, right? Most wood isn't going to be an issue, but I also think that you can just get metal. It's an aesthetic, really, when it gets down to it. You can make a raised bed out of logs and just, have logs, but they will break down over time. They can be a little pricey, but there are quite a few organic landscape design companies now, quite a few in Fairfield County, but they're now starting to emerge in Litchfield County, who come and build you a garden. They build you a physical space, fencing, raised beds, aisles, the whole gear. That's awesome if you can do that. But I think that non-treated is the way to go. Metal is more sustainable long-term, and less apt to have leaching issues. And you can also, it'll last forever. So, raised beds really come down to what your soil is like and how well it drains. And I would prefer everyone just go right into the ground. But raised beds, say, for example, you are bending over is difficult for you. A lot of people have raised beds. They now go up to about 2 to 3 feet high. So you're growing things without bending over. There's all sorts of ways to do it. There's vertical growing beds, where you start basically at chest height, and things grow down. So there's lots of ways to do the raised beds.
And find it out. So somebody wants to know if they're thrilled, and many people are saying thank you to you as we look at the chat box.
Thank
But
you.
someone wants to know about, is there a concern about ticks while working in the garden?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I it is a miracle that neither of my brothers or I have gotten limes, but we've certainly been bit by ticks. Uh, yeah. So, standard roll socks over your trousers, checking yourself each time you go. But a contained garden space, which doesn't have tall grasses, right, are less apt to have ticks hanging out in them, right? So that's one strength. A tidier garden is going to have fewer opportunities for ticks to hide out in them. But nonetheless, you just got to be careful, check yourself. I do basically from about now. Well, last week when we had those days in the 60s, the ticks were coming in on the dogs. And it's like, already. So you're spending time even with, Seresta collars. But yeah, ticks are part of it. It's part about being in nature,
Sort
unfortunately.
of being outside. But I like
That's
your
why you have
thoughts
to
about
support your possums because they eat ticks.
that. That's it. Um, when you were talking back again about the different kind of, if you do have raised beds and things, it sort of brings that question about, and you can go into these stores and see all this wonderful stuff. Um, are there startup funds? Is there something to, what would be the initial investment for starting
Yeah,
a
that's
small?
that's a good question. So, gardening, like any hobby or any sport, has a cost. Um, Building out a plot will have an initial investment cost. Say, for example, you want to do a 10 by 20 plot, you're going to have to remove the sod. And then if you can't till it, you're either going to fork what they call, you fork it over yourself, or you hire somebody, one of your local farms can come over with a tiller and you pay them $25 or whatever, $50 to till your soil. So there's certainly an upfront cost. Materials for things like fencing, absolutely. It's not cheap. It's usually like fencing is usually a one-time cost, or once every 10 years or so. If you use metal, it's a one-time cost. If you use wood posts, it might be more than that. Your netting. There are quite a few resources from simple as like going to Home Depot, or you can go online to Johnny's Selected Seed. They'll sell you these fancy New Zealand deer fences, and they'll sell you lion's urine to keep animals out, as if we need that. But there are some costs, but seeding yourself, building a rudimentary fence, it needn't be prohibitively expensive. Um, if you're doing raised beds, that'll add to the cost. But again, if you're doing a 10 by 20 or a 10 by 30 garden, a couple $100 in materials, and then your time, your sweat labor.
So back to
I
what you
wouldn't call
said,
it prohibitively expensive.
start small, use what you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I guess just one more question. Do you have favorite varieties that work well in our area, as whether it's tomatoes, squash,
Yeah.
eggplant, beans? And
Yeah.
then if we do buy seeds, are there companies that you would recommend people
Yes.
looking at?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So a couple things. I have a favorite for each season. My favorite spring crop are sugar snap peas. I highly recommend them. Nothing tastes better to me than a sugar snap pea. Crisp and just tastes like spring. Um, Obviously our farm is well known for tomatoes, but for a long time that's what people thought we only grew. But I love all the black varieties: Prudence Purple, Cherokee, Black Krim, Black from Tula. Amazing, right? Green zebra is another one, not a black variety, but like green zebra is another one of my favorite tomato varieties. I love leeks. I like all alliums. Alliums are easy to grow. You can store them. So garlic, onions, shallots, scallions, etc. We try to grow a lot of those at the farm. Garlic is an awesome plant. You plant it the year before. It's the first harvest of, last year. So, which is always great. So of a leek variety that I love, King Richard is what we call it, the wonderful headless, horseless leek. If you get the joke, you're a Shakespeare fan, which is good. Um, and so I would say King Richard is my leek variety that I love. Green zebra or black crim are my tomato varieties that I love. The super sugar snap or the sugar Ann are the varieties of sugar snap peas that I like. And then, gonna fall crop in there. I love winter squash. I love delicata and I love butternut. But if I was going to make the choice between the two, I'd say delicata squash. All those which I've just mentioned, you can have over a season. You plant them at different times and you'll have them all season. That's really, you'll be able to harvest and enjoy something new. So places that we go to, obviously, the big player in our world are Johnny Selected Seeds out of Maine. But we also, for some of the more esoteric stuff, we like High Mowing is a wonderful company. Seed Savers Exchange is another. Baker Creek, which are out of California. They used to be out of the Comstock Frere Company out of Connecticut and just south of Hartford. They're now based in California. And these companies, the latter three, all specialize in older heirloom seed stock. Now, for those of you who are wondering, heirloom seed stocks refer to any seed stock which has been open pollinated, i.e. birds and bees or wind, not somebody in a white jacket in a beaker, and are over 50 years old. So heirlooms as a variety are always, anytime a seed which was created, it turns 50, becomes an heirloom seed stock. Doesn't mean that we don't grow hybrids, which we do. Sometimes, to hedge risk, you've got to grow things which have been bred to be resistant to certain things. But I really like High Mowing and Seed Savers. Fantastic company. Every now and then we use a company like, Burpees, but not really. Most of your garden stores will have seed from a lot of these companies I've just mentioned, but you can also just go online and they can be in your door, within a matter of days.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
you get that. Yeah.
Johnny's, Seed Savers Exchange, High Mowing, can't go wrong.
Perfect. All right. Well, that I think we could just keep going on and on. I know I could keep going on and on.
Well, I hope
but-
I hope it made sense and people were got something out of it. It's a little broad, I understand, but I think when you're starting out, and I can only use my brothers and I as examples, a small plot can feel as if you're growing acres of food at first. So, start small. Don't get discouraged by how a garden can get out of hand, so quickly. But you can, and visit places like Judea, visit places like Waldingfield, visit, Kimberly's farm, like just go and see it on a larger scale. And then realize, wow, small can be mighty too. And I guarantee you, that first tomato that you grow, you'll be thrilled.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. And
Yeah,
we'll
I
be
greatly
looking for
appreciate your time.
all these vegetables to grow. And thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any questions, reach out. Thanks,
Thank you,
Patrick.
everybody. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.